Good morning, everyone. It's Jesse, and we're doing a little pop-up art session today, continuing where we left off from yesterday with our two little parrotlets. I found out that that's what I guess the technical term for these little guys is, parrotlets. First person on, please give me, or whoever jumps on and hears me, can you give me an audio check, please? Make sure you can hear me okay. I seem to be picking up a tiny bit of an echo, and I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. So if you guys could let me know, that would be great. Okay, but anyhow, we're going to be continuing our little session from yesterday. Good morning, Penny. Good afternoon to you, Debbie Sanderson in the UK. All right, Debbie Sanderson says all good, meaning my audio is good. Hi, Anita. Hi, Anita Beechler. How's it going? Welcome back. So it sounds like Penny, you said you can hear a little echo. Okay, anybody else? Can you hear a little? Can anybody hear an echo, or do I sound good? Hopefully it sounds okay. Let me know what's happening in the comments, please. That way I'm picking up a tiny bit of an echo, and I think it has to do with my settings on my phone over there that I'm using for that camera. But we'll see here in a bit. Very little, okay. I'll see if I can adjust that in just a second. Gloria Marie says sound check is good. A little just your deep voice, but you're hearing an echo. Okay, let me see if I can adjust that. Give me 1 second. All right, let's see here. Hold on 1 second, everyone. 1 second. Not for sure on that one over here. An echo. Hold on 1 second, everyone. How is that? All right, give me a sound check now, please. Interesting, Mike. Okay, no echo. I hear no echo on my end. Debbie Sanderson says no echo. There's no. Okay. So I think we're okay. I don't hear it anymore. So it's just a setting on my phone over there. Much better. Okay, fantastic. Had me worried there for a second. Every once in a while, something changes within the settings on the website platform that I use to stream these, and I'm not sure why. But okay, fantastic. So for those of you that didn't join me yesterday, yesterday was part one of our little pop-up art session where I taught you how to draw these little birds. We're painting from a reference photo today, right? We're drawing and painting from a reference photo. We're going to be doing much of this within the membership. For those of you that have already signed up, expect to see a lot of this in there. I'm not sure how often, but we are going to be painting from reference photos. I'll teach you how to duplicate, write an image onto a surface like we did here with the canvas. We took a photo, duplicated it by drawing it freehand. I'll show you techniques on how to do that, different ways to do that. And then, of course, we're painting it. So we're going to continue the painting part of it today. We're going to get moving here pretty quickly. I'm just going to show you guys my paint colors. I've got a little bit of a mess here on this plate, but I've got some kind of a light blue right here. I've got a little bit of a green color, light green. I've got this almost like a light purple lavender right here, a little bit of the lavender. Then I've got a deeper purple right here, okay, purple blue. This is just a dried up area from yesterday. We're not using that right now. I've got some yellow, some black, and then some white. So white, black, yellow, kind of a blue, purple, lavender, green, light green, and then a light blue. Okay, that's the main color palette for the birds. And for the background, I'm using a burgundy, some black, and some brown. Those are the colors I mixed together to create that background color. It's kind of similar to what's on the original picture, and we are going to do another layer over the background. The branch down here, we modified the painting so that I included a branch instead of an actual this little surface that they're on over there. I'm not quite sure what that is, but the branch is going to get a little bit of a brown and yellow combination, maybe a little bit of white once we detail a little bit more. So we're going to get right into it. Julie, I saw that. I saw your name pop up on my list this morning. So fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's right, Debbie. Sometimes Bluetooth can cause a bit of an echo, but good. Sounds like we are in business. So that's great. Now the session today is being recorded. It's nothing really formal. I kind of, decided to do this a couple of days ago. And so nothing real formal. We're not going to get super detailed into this. We're creating a little bit of a realistic painting from the reference photo. Anytime as I just kind of give you guys a little bit of a recap yesterday, I talked about what you do when you're going to paint from a reference photo, when you're going to reproduce a picture or, maybe there's an image of a photo image that you took of something on your vacation, et cetera, how you would go about reproducing that freehand. And so some things that you have to decide on, you got to look at the painting or the photo and decide, do I want to do a realistic rendering, or do I want to do a more of a cartoony perhaps style, or do I want to use an impressionistic style? You have to decide these things or have an idea about your approach at the beginning, right? So that you can use that to dictate what it is that you're going to be doing, your process. You can change things up as you're going. You can decide things as you go along, right? You can kind of pivot and just let the painting create itself as you're going. But it's always, or not always, but it's often good to have an idea as to what you want to do before you actually get going. Okay, that way you can kind of set up a little bit of an outline of what your approach is. But anyhow, we are doing kind of a semi-realistic image. I don't think we're going to get into making all the little tiny lines and the feathers, all those little tiny details that really would make the painting pop. But we are going to create a little bit of a semblance of feathers with paint. I just don't think we're going to be getting into all those little details. To reproduce something like this really, really close, to make it a really realistic painting, would take lots and lots of hours. We're looking at probably 5, 6, 7 hours to reproduce all the little tiny lines in there. And it can be done. It's a lot of fun. It just requires a lot of patience. But we're not going to be doing that today. We will be doing things like that in the membership from time to time. Something like that is a really detailed and involved piece. But within the membership, from time to time, we will tackle stuff like that. We'll really get into detailed work. There's not a whole lot around the birds, right? It's just the focus here is just the birds. And for those of you that want to get into realistic type paintings, we will be doing some of that in the membership. Okay. But anyway, ask your questions, etc., about the process, about the membership. For those of you that may not have heard about it, I did put a link in the description for the video. There's a link if you guys are interested in going to check out what the details around that are. Click on the link. It'll take you over to the Facebook post from a few days ago where I detailed everything that's included in the membership, cost, et cetera, et cetera. But if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer them. But let's get into our painting. Of course, always want to have some paper towels. I'm using, you've already seen, paper plates for my palettes. That's what I often will do. Even when I'm painting when I'm doing my commissions and things like that, my professional paintings, often it just makes it really easy. I use paper plates. I do have other surfaces that I use for my palettes, but often it's just my paper plates. But as far as brushes for today, and I don't think I went over my brushes yesterday, but I'm going to do a quick rundown of the brushes that I'm using. Nothing fancy. I've got a big 1-inch brush. Let me switch the image now so that there we go. Much better. Big 1-inch brush. I'm mostly going to be using this for the background. Okay. I've got a smaller, this is about a 1/2-inch brush. This is actually a number 8 flat. Actually, I think this is a bright. This is actually a bright. I often, a flat and a bright are really similar. The brights tend to be a little longer, and they tend to have rounded edges. Okay, rounded points. So the edge of the top, instead of being flat and perfectly across, they're slightly rounded. The brights hold quite a bit more paint. You can get one of the features of the bright is that they hold more paint, so you can, paint for longer before having to reload. Okay, a flat brush looks more like this. Technically, really close, but they're more square in shape, and the edges are pointier. In case any of you were wondering, okay, they hold less paint. Okay, but anyhow, so I've got a number 8 here, or it's close to about a 1/2 inch flat brush, flat or bright, whichever one you'd like to use there. I'm not gonna, tell you, oh, that's wrong. Technically it is, but that's okay. So then I've got my little number 3 flat, okay, little number 3 flat brush, and then I've got a zero round brush. Okay, this I will be using to create a little tiny bit of those feathers here and there. I would prefer to have like a 00 or a 000. Those are much smaller and easier to make those little lines with. I don't have any here in my studio. I have them at home. I do have a specialized set of really, really fine point brushes. I'll bring those in. It's been a while since I've used them, so I kept them at home. I actually opened up my studio. It's been a few months now, 4, 5, 6 months. I can't remember. Maybe more than that. 7 months. Can't remember, but I have not had any use to bring those small brushes into the studio, but I'll bring those in. But if you ever see those brushes, they'll say like 00 or 000. Those are really tiny, fine brushes, and those would be really good for creating those little tiny lines in there. You can also use a small fan brush, smaller than this. When you dip this into the paint and water, a lot of times the bristles tend to clump up a little bit. So those are good to create those little tiny lines within your paintings. We're not going to be doing that today. At some point within the membership, I will be going really deep into using specialized brushes for certain paintings or for certain themes within a painting. Those are part of the workshops that we'll be doing within the membership. But for today, just wanted to show you that there are different types of brushes, and there's so many different kinds of brushes out there. There's actually some really nice specialized brushes that you can use. I don't use those often with my studio, but at one point within the membership, I'll start bringing those in for those of you that would like to see those. But so anyway, just wanted to point out the brushes. What we are going to be using are all the main brushes that I just showed you a little bit ago. Okay, but all right. So let's take a look at our painting. Another thing I'm going to show you today that I've never done within my painting sessions that you guys have been on. What I did here is I created a little bit of a color scale. I know this looks a little messy. What this starts with is something like this. So these are all the colors that I'll be using within my darker bird. This is a little bit more of a purple blue hue. I'm not sure if it comes through on the video, but this is a little bit more of a purple bluish hue. So these colors are what I'm going to use here to create this bird. Okay. Well, what I do is when I'm going to create a color scale where I have a transition of a darker hue to a lighter hue, which is what we find in this bird. Okay, so you have areas that are a little darker in this color or deeper in this blue, and then there's lighter sections, and then there's darker sections where there's a shadow or maybe even a little bit of gray in the bird. I think it's mostly just shadow side there, but there could be a little bit of gray in there as well. But what you do oftentimes when you're going to paint is you create a color scale. So for example, over here, when I mix these colors, this will be the deepest hue of that blue, and then I transition to the lightest hue of that blue. So I have them all lined up together, and then as I'm painting my bird, I can just kind of, work from this palette, and I have everything laid out in front of me. It's a lot easier than mixing them on the go. Okay, this is a little bit more of an organized way to do such a thing, and so that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to take a little bit of this blue, I'm going to come over to the side, take a little tiny bit of my green. Okay, I'm going to take some white. So again, what I'm doing is I'm creating the deepest hue of that blue that we have in there. Not the darkest, but the deepest, more intense blue in there. Okay, and it's something like that. Now I want to mix enough to be able to cover everywhere that I'm going to use this paint. Now, just wanted a quick recap on what we did here. All of this that you see inside looks kind of watercolorish, and that's one thing about acrylic paint. You can create some watercolor effects by thinning it out. You can use water to thin it out, or you can just use a really thin layer of paint and spread it out. So this that you see here is all the first layer of the colors that we worked with yesterday. So we have a little bit of that light bluish teal in here, the more intense blue, transitions over to a really nice light blue. The gray parts that you see in here are pencil coming through where I shaded in by hand when I drew those. These are nice. When you do that in pencil, when you draw it in pencil and you put those little shaded areas in, as I mentioned yesterday, they'll come through the paint, and they can enhance the layers of paint that come on above it. But it also acts as a marker, so it's easier for you to see where you're going to add those in your painting, even though you've got the reference photo over here. Oftentimes, by adding it in pencil, it just makes it a little easier to see. Okay, so but anyway, that's what we did yesterday. We laid down the first layer of paint. So today we're going to be doing the second layer. Now, I don't know that we'll get into a third layer. We'll see. It depends on how much time we have, but that's kind of a quick recap of what we did. So back to my little color scale here. So again, I want to mix enough. Get a little more of that green. So the paint over here, I laid it out before we started. It's already drying out a bit, so I'm grabbing from up here. Okay, so there's one color, and that's pretty close to what I want. Maybe it needs a little bit more blue. I can kind of use the reference photo. If I'm trying to match the colors in the reference photo, I just kind of come over it. I'm not trying to do an exact match, just something kind of close. Okay, so there's my first shade. Now I'm going to take the paint that's in my brush here, and I'm going to bring it down here. Okay, I don't want to waste any paint. Now I'm going to make a lighter shade of this. So we're transitioning from a deeper to a lighter, and then I will maybe over to the side have the darker gray area. I'll bring those over here. There's not a whole lot of different shades of gray in here. There's a couple of them. I'll bring those over to the side. Again, more of this, we're going to get into this kind of detail in the membership. This isn't stuff that I've done on my lives. Maybe a couple of times I've touched on this, but not a whole lot. Okay, so now that's a lighter version of that. I'm going to bring what's on the brush. I bring it over here. And bring this white over. I want it lighter still. Let me need to grab some from my palette here really quickly. Painting requires a little bit of patience, right? As far as your setup, pre-prep, things like that, it's kind of up to you. As you go along, the more you paint, you're going to find your own processes, right? You're going to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but you're going to customize your own things like your pre-prep and do you paint mostly on the fly? Do you want to finish a painting in one sitting? Are you the type of person that can let a painting sit for a couple of days, do a little bit at a time, or even weeks at a time? You'll develop all of that the more you paint. And of course, it also depends on how much time you've got. Maybe you're really busy and you have to do your paintings all in one shot. But yeah, the more you paint, the more you'll be developing your own style. And that's kind of, again, what we're looking to do within finding your brush stroke. So these are almost identical. I'm okay. I'm going to leave them at that. There aren't a lot of different transitions within our bird. But we'll see once I get going. But this is kind of the idea. Don't worry about that black up there. The black is what I'm going to use to make the gray over to the side. But I've got a little bit of a scale going here. These are the colors that are going to be used within the bird. As I start to add my paint to the bird, I may realize that I need something in between these or something in between there. And I'll mix that on the fly. But I generally try to have, when I'm pre-prepping for a painting that's going to, let's say a commission piece, something that I'm going to give away as a gift, and I want to have a really nice painting. Those are the types of things that I will do. I'll set up my scales, and then I'll use that. I try to make sure I have enough paint so I don't run out part way through and have to remix remixing a color can be a little tricky sometimes. Okay, so, but anyway, I'm going to start with this. Actually, first I'm going to move over and do some of the, I'm going to take a little bit of this, bring it over to the side. We got a little bit of black. Now, oftentimes, I don't use black to darken a color. I'll use another color, a deeper, darker color, to darken a color. So in this case, though, I am using that black. When we talk about color theory within the membership, we'll get into more of that stuff. But okay, so there's one. I'll bring that over here. It's in the darkest areas on my bird. Seem to match pretty closely, so I think we're good. I'm just going to add a little bit more, a lighter shade of this gray down here. I'm just reaching over and dipping. When you see me go off camera, well, actually, you see me up on the other feed, but I'm just going over and grabbing a little bit more white. One more time. Okay, there we go. So now I've got two grays in there. Now, because I grabbed from here when I brought the paint over, it's going to have a hint of these colors in there already. But if I want to add a little bit more, I can take a little bit of this and just introduce it to each of these to make sure there's a little bit of that original hue in there. Even though it looks gray in the image, there is some of the light blue and the other colors that you see in there, right? If you were to turn that bird or shine a light on that area, you're probably going to see a little bit of these colors in there. So you want to make sure that some of this color is in your mix. Even though that looks like gray, like it's just gray. Okay, there we go. So here's my little palette. That's what I would work with to start adding colors to my bird. The beak is a different story, right? I would create a different. Now, for something like that, I don't necessarily need to create a color scale like that, but we could. So, all right, just cleaning up my brush a little bit. We're going to get right into adding some layers to the bird. Let me look at your questions here really quick, see if anybody's popped on and asked any questions. What's happening, Vivian? What's happening, Pamela from Florida? How's it going? How's it going? Jill. How's it going, Jill? Just jumping on a minute. Got to paint along with the replay. Wish I had time now. No worries. Come on back with the replay. Everything's being recorded. Same as with yesterday's session. But all right, so here we go. So let's take a look at our bird here. Where are we going to start? I'm going to start with the deepest color first. Okay? Most of the time, not always, you will take your darkest color first and start with that and start layering your lighter colors over that and around it. Okay? Now what I'm doing here is I'm using the brush to paint in the direction of the feathers. Wherever I see, whatever direction I see the feathers going in there, I paint in that direction. Okay? Now this is a little deeper color than what's in there, but I'm okay. I like that. I like the change. If I didn't, let's say I said, you know what, I want to lighten that up, I would simply take a little bit of white with my brush. Okay, just a little bit of white. And I could, right over the top of this, right over the wet paint, I can start lightening it up a little bit. And I don't have to do that to the entire area that I just added paint to. I can just do it to select little spots to lighten certain areas up. Okay? A lot of my process, and a lot of artists in general, that's the process that we use. We'll start going and we make adjustments on the fly. And those are things that you're going to start to pick up on again the more you paint. At the beginning, things seem a little overwhelming. And what I tell people is just do it. Stop overthinking it. You're going to learn a lot simply by doing. You're not always going to be happy with your results, but you are going to learn quite a bit as you go. And just like with anything else, the more you do it, the better you get. So now I'm just going to go around, and wherever I see this color in the image, in the original, I'm just going to start to add a little bit here and there. So like maybe here at the top. So I'm doing all the areas with this color around the same time. So I'm using my little number 3 brush, synthetic bristle brush. This is a pretty stiff, these are pretty stiff bristles. So brush in the direction of the feathers, very important. Even though it's really subtle, it makes a really big difference. Okay, so let's see, where else do we have some of this? Maybe down here. It's a little bit of a darker area, so we'll overlap that with a little bit of our gray. This gray, when we overlap it on top of this, it's going to create a little bit of a combination of both colors. There's a little bit of a blending action that happens. Okay, so all right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab some of this, coming down to my next shade. Okay, my next shade of color here. Okay, and I just had to expand the image over on my screen so I can get a better view. And let's see, we're going to add some of this over here. Now the feathers here go over to the side. And notice my brush strokes. And notice what I'm doing here. I'm using the brush to feather the paint out in the direction of the feathers. Very important. Painting is always about layering. And depending on the, now here where I had my blue, really quickly before I continue with that thought, where I put that layer of blue, I have very little paint left on the brush, and I'm just lightly feathering this new paint color right over the top of it. So there's a little bit of a blending action that happens at the same time, but I don't want to eliminate that color underneath completely. I can use my finger to come in here and just lightly blend those two together. There we go. Painting is about layering. Okay, you layer, and the more detail you want in your painting, the more layering that typically involves. You go from a very kind of general layer, and you slowly transition. Your layers on top get more detailed as you go. Generally, that's the process. Okay, so just taking this. We're going to paint for about an hour, maybe hour and a half today. And we'll see where we are when we're at the end of that hour and a half or so. We'll decide if we need one more session. All right. So again, I'm just coming over and overlapping what I did earlier with that first blue hue. Two colors blend a little bit, combine a little bit. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to continue. I'm going to go down a little bit. I'm going to add some of this color down here, for example. These are subtle changes. Let me add a little bit more paint over here. I'm going to scoop up a little bit of that. So I showed you guys this. I should be grabbing from over here, but like I mentioned, some of this is already drying out. So, all right. Okay, and here we go. Down in here. It's a little hard for the camera to pick it up, but by me brushing in the direction of the feathers, I'm already creating texture. And now some of the paint is, as it's getting applied to the canvas, is going on a little thick. So I'm able to see some of the brush strokes already. And that's what I'm looking for. I like seeing brush strokes in paintings. I typically, while I'm more of a realistic style painter, I don't like ultra realism. I like to see brush strokes. It's just the aesthetic quality of those brush strokes to my eye is really pleasing. So in my personal style, I like to see those brush strokes. On top of which, in this case, it adds texture and it gives the eye the illusion that you've got, those little fine lines that I'm creating with the actual brush are feathers. Okay, so there's a lot that goes on in here, a lot of stuff that's kind of subtle and not necessarily something that everybody enjoys, but again, you find your style, and you some people don't like to see brushstrokes as much. Some people like to have a really realistic painting, right? Something that looks almost like a photo. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of talent to create something that looks like a photo. But again, you find your style, and that's what you go with. So I'm still working with the same color of that light blue, this color right here. And I'm layering. I'm using the reference photo here. This is going to be a little darker in a little bit, but I'm using this first or the second layer to start creating the hue or the tone of what that area is going to look like when I add my grays over that. Okay. Again, we're layering a bit. And here where my pencil lines are, my shading from the pencil, I can use those pencil lines to blend into the paint, and it also creates a little bit of a shadow in there. Okay, let me load up again. Now this is again kind of a stiff flat brush that I'm using, synthetic bristles. It's kind of nice. The softer, if it was too soft, I wouldn't have as much control of the lines that I'm creating in the painting. Okay, so let me take a little step back. Let me look at my painting from a distance. It's easier for me to take an overall assessment of what we got going on. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and transition to my next color, this one right in here. And I'm going to come in here, this little area that's a little, actually I'm going to start down in here. The brightest area on my bird is right in there, which is what I'm about to add here. Okay, we're going to come over here. Now, again, I want to remind everyone we're not going for a super realistic look. We're kind of somewhere in between, a little impressionistic in some parts with a touch of realism. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just dabbing with the brush, allowing the color that I'm adding right now to blend with the color underneath. So what this does is it starts creating kind of a transition between the colors on the bird. The edges will start to kind of blend together, so you don't have these really harsh edges. Okay, grab a little more of that. Come up over here. If it's too much, don't want to add that much paint. Right up in here. When we start to add things like the eyes, or detailing the eyes, detailing the beaks, cleaning up our background, our bird will slowly start to stand out more and more. All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take a little bit of this shade, this darker paint that we're going to use for some of the shadows. And let's see here. We're going to start right over here. Grab a little bit of the other one here. Once I start to apply the paint to the canvas, I can tell whether I need to go darker or lighter. So it looks like I'm gonna have to go a little bit darker, but this is okay for now, right now. Use that in there for now. Okay, and then I'm gonna bring this over here. Notice how I'm holding my brush, okay? Nothing too fancy. I'm not up here doing this. I could be more control. If I'm doing something like this, normally I'm using the canvas to support my hand, stabilizes my hand. Pinky hand stabilizer. Okay, so there's a little bit of shadow here under the beak. We're going to start to apply that also. Now, you can use the corners of your brush for the smaller areas, like what I'm about to do right now here under the beak. I'm just using the corner of my brush. Turn it over and okay, it comes over. Here. So again, as we're layering, the bird starts to take shape. Now, some of this is it's a little bit advanced, I would say, somewhere in the intermediate level, some of what I'm doing in here. But even if you're not at this particular stage, you can attempt it. Give it a shot. Give it your best shot. It's going to be a little frustrating in some cases, but that's okay. That is how you will force your brain to learn. If you're really interested in learning how to paint, learning how to draw, it's those difficult paintings that cause you to want to pull your hair out that will make you better. People shy away from the struggle, oftentimes because they don't want to look bad. They don't want to produce something they're not going to like, and they don't want the criticisms, etc. First, you don't have to show anybody, right? You can paint for yourself and not even worry about that. I would say don't be afraid of that either. Who cares? Somebody else may criticize your painting, and it is what it is. But it does. What's the creativity takes courage. There's a quote out there floats around. Creativity takes courage for different reasons. But anyway, you push yourself, and yeah, you're going to struggle and you're going to get frustrated. But as long as you don't stop, you will force your brain to adapt. Okay, that is one of the ways that you learn. So even if you feel like a particular piece might be too difficult, I know lots of people, a lot of times in my painting sessions, the tutorials that I've done over the months here on Painting with Jesse, I noticed that the more difficult ones often were the most popular ones, the ones that got the most likes when I posted pictures. Hey, we're going to be doing this, in 3 weeks or whatever. Lots of likes, lots of people. Oh my gosh, it's such an awesome, looks great, love it, I want to do it, I want to do it. But those were the ones that had the least amount of people painting because people were intimidated. Okay, and then also those were the ones that I would get the smallest percentage of people sending me their pictures. I think because what happened is a lot of people would abandon the painting part way, or they would say, I'll come back to it. Or they were maybe not pleased with the results, and so they didn't send them to me. But my point is, push through those hard ones. Push through the hard ones. Those are often where you're going to make the most gains in your abilities. You don't have to know everything about painting or drawing or whatever art you're endeavoring to do. You don't have to know everything. You just jump into it, go for it. You will learn the hard way, but that's often the best way. Okay, you can study everything on paper and you can watch other people do it, and you will pick up on a lot of what's happening and get some ideas and stuff, but you will learn more by actually jumping in and doing. Okay, so if something looks hard, don't shy away from it. Jump into it. So I'm just going around. Now what I'm about to do here is I'm going to dip my brush into my water cup. Okay, those of you that know, I always have a rinse cup handy. With acrylic paint, you always want to have a rinse cup handy. I'm going to take some of this water, and I'm thinning out the paint a little bit. It does two things. It makes the paint a little easier to work with as far as spreading it on the canvas, but it also thins it out, brightening it up a little bit. I'm going to use this to just over the top of some of what I've already done, adding these little lighter hues of this gray. Okay. Now you don't want to add a whole bunch of water where you got some runny paint, but you want to add enough to lighten it up to the point that when you apply it, it looks like you actually added white to your paint. Okay, it looks like you used a lighter color to mix in with it. And all you did was actually add water. So let me give you a little close-up of what's happening here. Okay. So all these colors that I'm adding, and I'm using this little method where I'm just kind of using short little brush strokes. I'm painting the directions of my direction of the feathers. Again, patience, right? A little patience. All the colors are beginning to mix and blend and create different hues that I don't even have on the palette. Okay. Now, you do not have to use this method. You could, let's say, for example, there's another style that I like to often paint with, and I'm just going to demonstrate this. Instead of doing all that blending, I could take like a gob of this paint here, and I'm going to apply it here to some of my lighter sections, and I'll do stuff like this. I love this style. This is a different style that we'll be learning in the membership. Told you guys we're going to experiment with this, with different stuff, and you're going to learn. This is probably my favorite way to paint. When I do my portraits, when I do, I'm just applying these little dabs of paint. Okay, and so I would do that. And like in here, for example. I'm using those short brush strokes again, but they're more precise, more controlled. And what will happen is those colors start to blend in with what's underneath. I could also take the edges with my finger or paper towel and slightly dab over the top of them to blend in the edges with the background, so they're not quite as stark. Okay, but again, then I would do the same thing. And this is my favorite way to paint. When I say paint can be blissful, this is what I'm talking about. For me, as a personal, as a preference, just these little dabs of color that create these really cool little effects. Okay, and you start to, again, you're creating depth, you're creating transitions of color within the painting. So as an example, this little highlight here at the top, right in there, I grab a dab of this paint right in here, or even a little bit of that. The more you do it, the more control you begin to have. But I'll come in here and I'll just, okay, look at that. A little pop of color now on that edge. Right in there, right in there. And as I pull across, I start at the top because that's where I want the more intense color to be. As I pull away, I actually lift my brush off the canvas at the same time, creating a nice little pop of color. A little blissful brush stroke. Okay, so you see how that creates, I know it looks like the painting might be a little washed out. Let me see if I can lower my light over there just a touch. so that I can, so maybe less washed out. Let's see. Okay, that's about as good as it's going to get right there, I think. But anyhow, with these processes, you start to see how that works. Let me step out for a bit, see if there's any other questions that have come up. Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much. But anyway, I'm looking at the comments right now. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Okay. Let's see if I've missed anything. Let's see. All right. Cool. No questions so far. It looks like you're all probably busy painting. I'm going to take a little sip of my coffee here. Cheers to you guys, and thank you for joining me on this Wednesday morning or afternoon, wherever you might be. I still have my using my wife's coffee cup again, the one that says, "Hello, lovely." If she watches this, she's going to go, "That's where my coffee cup went." Got up a little extra early this morning. Been up since about 5:30. So yeah, need a little coffee. But okay. I'm going to move over from this guy here for a little bit. I'm going to come over to this bird. Okay, and we're going to do a little bit of what we did on this to this one. And then we're going to come back to this guy. I'm going to start working on the beak and the eyes, and then we'll do an assessment, see where we are, and then continue continue adding more layers on top of layers. Okay. Again, painting is about adding layers, and who knows, I might pivot and use a slightly different style to finish off a little faster. But you guys get the idea as to how this all works, and that's the main part. So back to my little number 3 brush. I have my palette right here. I'm going to go ahead and take some of these colors and bring them down here. Okay, I'm going to do this. Have about 3 or 4 shades in that bird. So, in this guy here. So, okay, let me do my little little more than that, a little more than that. Right there, right there. Okay. Some of that white, a little less white, a little more white, quite a bit more white. So this is going to be my lightest area down here, my lightest shade. And you notice I went from a lot of purple, less purple as I go down, less white, starts at the top and increases as I go down. Okay. I can do the same in here where I have less of this blue, but it's kind of a color that's in between, so I'm not too worried about that. But we'll start, let's start down here. Let's mix this shade first. Okay, going to need a little more white than that. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Okay, so next one up here, use the paint that's in my brush now. This one should be a little darker. Okay. Darker still. And again, the idea is that you mix enough paint to cover everything that's going to be that particular color in your bird. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of my blue. Whoops, wrong one. I think I need to add a little bit of this. So I'm going to take a little bit of this color. And I'm going to put it right up in there. I'm going to add a little bit of that to each of my mixtures. A little bit. Okay. So here we go. I've got some paint on my brush already, so we're going to start with what's on there. I'm also going to take, now I didn't create the shadow colors over here yet. Let me go ahead and do those real quickly. A little too much there. So we're going to bring that over here. Add a little bit of this. Okay. Now those colors aren't perfectly blended. I can see some transitions within the mixture itself. I'm not looking to create a perfectly blended color. I want there to be some variations within the paint. So that when I apply it, I create some of those variations in the painting. Okay, so let me clean up my brush and let's get going. In a little bit, I'm going to darken in the background. Might work on the branch a little bit, but we're going to reassess and see where we need to go from there. Okay? But all right, here we go. We're going to start right up with, let's see, this is a little too intense, I think. I'm going to mix a little bit of black with this. I want to darken it up just a little bit. So as I bring my palette over and I do this, I get a better idea as to what I want. Okay, there we go. Okay, right in here, little cheekbones. Let's see where we are. Brushing in the direction of the feathers. Okay, a little too dark, so let me grab a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And right over the top. Okay, and you take that, come over the top over here, top of one bird's head. Paint in the direction of the brush of the feathers. Again, very important. Don't forget, folks, for those of you that are, I've got quite a few people subscribed so far. And other than the people that subscribed through the night or this morning, you should all already have received an email from me, welcome email. A little survey in there. I want some feedback. So I'm just taking this color and going around to some of these darker areas on the bird, adding those first. So I'd like some feedback. If you're on here and you've already joined the membership, make sure you look for that survey. If you have time, please send it over. I'd love to hear your feedback. I ask questions as to what you'd like to see within the membership, just preferences and things like that. I'm going to use those answers to tailor the content within the membership. So also, if you're planning on joining, remember that the cutoff is this Saturday, midnight is the cutoff for the founding members launch. I wouldn't wait till the last minute. I know some people like to wait till the last minute. Any glitches or anything like that. I've had a couple of people reach out and say, hey, I tried to join. I had a little bit of a hard time. Had to try it a couple of times. But, finally got in. So just in case you're, procrastinating a bit or thinking about it, I wouldn't necessarily wait till the last minute. Maybe Saturday morning or Friday, jump in. But anyhow, yeah, so the cutoff is this Saturday. Just remember, lots of fun stuff, lots of value within the membership. So if you haven't heard, there's a link in the description of the video. You can click on it. It'll take you to the post on Facebook where I talk about it. So, all right, just taking this and coloring in all the shaded areas down, for example, down there at the bottom, right? And again, what am I doing? Which direction am I brushing in? Direction of the feathers. Sound like a broken record, but just in case anybody, hasn't heard me or didn't pick up on that. We're going to have different levels of paintings within there. Most of the people that are joining are going to be beginners to novices, although I do have some people that have joined that have been painting for a while, quite some time. But no matter your level of experience, you're going to find value in there. We have Q&As. We're going to be doing some Q&As every month where we meet over Zoom, most likely over Zoom. You guys ask questions. I'll troubleshoot your, maybe your challenges. We talk about stuff that's upcoming, and maybe you show me your paintings, and I assess them a little bit. We have workshops where we just paint one particular thing. Maybe it's clouds. Just take a whole hour or hour and a half or whatever it is, however long it takes, and paint clouds, or a particular tree or flower, or we work on brush technique. So now I'm going around the edge of my bird. Now, this part that I'm doing right now, I would be better suited doing it once I've got my background all done. But when I come around the edges, let me give you a little close-up. With my brush, as I do this, the very corner of the bristles go past the edge of my bird. I start creating those little feathers popping off the top of the head. Okay? So little subtle things that will make a really big difference in your painting. But that I wouldn't do till I have my background all dialed in. I don't want to paint around that because I'm going to cover those up. There's no way to paint in between all those little lines that are popping out of the edge of the bird. So again, folks, this is just one style of painting. Okay. Some people don't like all the detail, the tediousness of something like this. For me, when I'm painting by myself and my room is, let's see, my studio, I'm listening to my music. A lot of times I would paint in the middle of the night. I'd start like at 10 at night and just paint through the night. And the quietness, just me and the paint, my brushes, and a little music in the background. There's a really kind of meditative quality about the whole thing. But it requires a little bit of patience. Okay, this style of painting does. Okay, again, we could recreate these birds with a different style where there's less of this little tedious brushstroke, kind of like what I showed you earlier when I was dabbing the paint. And we'll get into that. But sounds good, Francine. How are you? What's happening, Ivy? From San Diego, had eye surgery a week ago and can see much better. Looking forward to joining soon. Awesome, Ivy. Sounds good. Okay. Again, we're adding detail and the birds are starting to pop into place. Okay. They're starting to look more and more like real birds. Although we're not trying to go completely into realism mode. Okay. But all these little brush strokes that I'm using in this method, in this style, create these they're like little, almost like tufts of feathers that you see on birds. Okay, gives you that illusion. And painting is just that. It's illusion. Right? It's all about tricking the eye into making it think that you're looking at in this case, birds. Oftentimes when you produce a painting, it's meant to be looked at from a particular distance. From particular distances where you'll get the most benefit. When you get up really close and tight on a picture, you can see all the brush strokes, right? You can see all the things that make or a lot of the things that make up the painting. But all right, let's add some highlights to our little bird here. So down here, I'm actually going to bring some of this over to the side. Now this hue that I made up here, I kind of like it, so I'm going to kind of stick with that. And bring some of that down here. Again, you can make changes as you go on the fly. Something's turning out a little differently than what you originally thought, but you're enjoying it. You're liking it. You switch. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. You do want to be a little bit loose with your kind of your approach. Be open to changing things up and switching gears. A lot of times you'll end up thinking your painting's going to turn out a certain way, and as you're going, maybe it's going in that direction, and then all of a sudden something happens within your painting that you go, oh, wait a minute, I like that better. You don't want to be so rigid where you can't allow, spontaneity to come into your paintings. Very important. It's also just a much more fun way to paint. But all right, let's add some highlights, little feathers in here, up there. Once you paint in the beak a little bit, to add in the eye, the little details around the eye, the eyes of the birds will start to pop a little bit more. It's each little step creates, a little extra depth. Just going through and looking at the image here, finding the little highlights to add. Sometimes when you add a highlight, if it's too strong, like in this case, that's a little too bright, I can just use my fingers to come in there and blend it into the background a little bit more and reducing the intensity. Sometimes, right, you'll take a pop of paint, you'll apply some paint, all of a sudden it pops too much, it's too bright. And you'll just use your fingers to reduce it, or a paper towel, or sometimes I'll wear gloves when I paint, especially when I'm painting with oil paint. Again, a little bit of water. I just added a touch of water to my paint. Took some white paint. I had some little bit of water on my brush. Thin it out a bit. I further thin it out by spreading the paint out on the palette like this. I don't want a lot of paint on my brush. Now I'm going to come in here. Okay. Here. All right, we're about to let's start working on the background a little bit. And then we're going to come in and work on the eyes and the beaks. And then we'll see where we go from there. But all right, I'm going to keep my brush here in my water cup. I'm not using it. I've got my colors for my background. Okay, burgundy, some black, and some brown. Start with this burgundy. Bring it down here. Take a little bit of brown. Now you notice when I grab the colors, I don't go right into the center unless I'm going to use it all or most of it. I come in on the edges and grab some paint and bring it over. The reason why I don't start right in the center is because I don't want to pollute that whole section. I'm going to be using some of this brown as long as I've got some left over for my tree later, and I don't want to have red in there. So you want to, just like that, take a little bit from the side. Don't pollute your entire section of paint there. Take a little bit at a time. So here we go. Now this is the color that I'm going to use around the birds. immediately around the birds. It transitions to a little bit darker around the edges. So there we go. If I want the paint to flow a little bit, I'm going to take a little water, dip my brush into the water cup. Do that a couple of times. Don't need a whole lot of water in there, but a little bit, just a few drops. Again, this just helps make the paint flow quite a bit more. So here we go. And I'm not going to come up right next to the birds for now. I'm going to use a smaller brush for that. But I'm going to paint around like this. This second layer, and I don't think we're going to need a third layer for the background, but this second layer is going to even things out. It's going to remove that blotchiness that's currently in that first layer around that background. And let's see, I'm going to bring this down here below the branch a little bit also. Lift this guy up. Now I have a branch in here. Might add some leaves to it later. We'll see. A couple of branches. Now I'm painting in different directions. Adding the water, the little bit of water to my paint helped thin it out just enough, and where the layer isn't really thick and it blends in nicely with the background. Okay. Now, before I continue around the edges, I'm going to take my big brush here. I'll stick it in my water cup for a moment. I'm going to switch over to one of my other brushes, smaller bright brush here. A little bit of water again, just a touch, maybe down here. And now I'm going to take this and outline the birds carefully. Okay. Now I don't leave the outline like that. For those of you that were painting with me yesterday, saw what I do. So if I leave it like that, there's an obvious difference between the background, the area that I did previous, and to where that outline is. I want to come in here and I want to brush out the border so that it transitions into that background nicely. Otherwise, when the painting dries, I'm going to be able to see that outline. Okay, so I want to just go through there and lightly pull away on the paint layer. Okay, and let's continue. Okay. Wow, it's almost 10 o'clock. Time flies. Okay, we're going to paint for another maybe 20 minutes, and we'll see where we are at that point. We're going to do one more session of this. Part 3, tomorrow. I think tomorrow. I'll look at my calendar. It should work tomorrow. I'll look at my calendar here in a moment. But all right. Time flies when you're chatting and painting. Chatting a little too much, maybe. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm sure you don't. We'll do a third session. It's kind of nice to paint in segments, in stages. You can come back to your painting, and when you come back, you'll often look at it with fresh eyes, and you're able to more easily see things that you hadn't picked up on before. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the dark area up on top. So I'm going to bring more of this down here. Okay, I need a larger batch. So I need some of that brown. But mainly this is a really dark burgundy that I'm creating now for the edges. Okay, the rest of the outside of the painting. The background of the painting. Okay, I'm going to take a little water, dip my brush in there. Wow, time just flew. It is almost 10 o'clock. Julie says, we'll have to redo my drawing. They look like penguins. It's okay, Julie. Practice makes perfect. Or you can simply paint penguins instead. Oftentimes it's funny because a lot of times as I'm going through on a painting, sometimes I'll make a mistake on something. Like I'll accidentally add paint where I didn't want paint to be. Ooh, like that. A couple little drops of paint that just went flying. Luckily, they didn't go anywhere that creates a big problem. But what I have to decide, let's say those, I'm not sure if you guys can see, there's a couple of drops of paint. Now I can easily just brush those out. But if it was something that was a completely different color, I have to decide, can I use that? How can I use that without having to fix it, without having to remove it? Because removing it could be problematic. You remove the paint underneath, then you have to add another layer of paint, to fix it. What I'll do first is I always look to see if I can incorporate it into the painting. If I can incorporate it, if I can get creative enough to incorporate it where it makes sense, that's what I'll do. If not, I'll leave it alone. Then I'll remove it. If I can't incorporate it, then I'll go about removing it as carefully as I can so I don't create a problem with the layers underneath. Okay, so I'm going around with this black, with this really dark burgundy around my outer areas. What this does is it creates a nice area of lighting around the birds where the focus is on them. Okay, but I want to blend this. I want to blend those two colors, the edges, a little bit. So what I'm going to do with this brush is I'm just going to remove all that extra paint. There's still a little bit of paint on there, and I'm just going to blend these two areas together. Both sections are still wet. So when I do this, I'm just blending the two edges, the two different colors that I've got on here at the edges. And just go back and forth between the two. And what that does is spreads the paint in both paint colors in both directions, in either direction. There's one way to blend. And I'm using my eyes here as I'm doing this to see where I need to blend more or where the blending is already nice. So now what I'm doing is I'm simply taking that darker color and I'm pulling it in the direction of the lighter paint in the middle. You notice I haven't dipped, I didn't grab any more paint. I'm using what's left on the brush. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing down here. Now this, I'm going to add a little bit more paint. Bring it over. I'm also going to grab a little bit more water in this case, a little bit of water in my brush. I'm going to thin the paint out a little bit, just with the water. Remember, adding water can thin out your color a bit, can lighten it. Okay, let me do the same thing over here. So what we're going to do here in a little bit, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and do work on the eyes and the beak, clean those up a bit, make those stand out a little more, and then we'll see where we are. But we're going to have a third session here. I was jabbering so much I lost track of time. It doesn't seem like we've been painting for that long. Feels like went into a time warp, but that happens when you're painting often. Okay. Hi, Tina. It is. It'll stay recorded. It'll stay here. It'll stay here for a little while. You have a couple of weeks to paint it. Okay. But all right. So look at the transition there. It's a little wet, so maybe a little easier to see. But it is reflecting some light, so maybe not so easy to see. Okay. It's subtle, but it does the trick. Okay, just going to feather some of this in here like this. So again, the sessions are being are recorded. There's a part 1 and a part 2. Okay, part 1 yesterday we drew everything and then we added a little bit of a layer of paint, first layer of paint. But look at the birds. Look at that. Okay, you see that? I'm trying to catch the light right. So, but you see how it starting to look like they have feathers. Okay, but there is again, there's a process with this style here, and it just takes a little patience. But all right. Cynthia Sama. I have a small party of 13-year-old girls that love painting in Deku and Bagukao on Saturday. Hi, Cynthia. I don't have any anime characters right now. I don't have any time to create anything around anime. One thing that I'm planning on in the future, not anytime very soon, is a separate membership around cartoon or caricature drawings and paintings. It's kind of a unique niche for lots of people, but things like the Peanuts, anime, maybe characters around anime, things like the Grinch, styles where you have these, where we're reproduced, not styles, but maybe an art membership where we strictly work on characters, popular characters, like Jack and Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, things like that. But as far as anything anime at the moment, I don't have anything. Wish I did. I've had that request come up a few times in the past, but just haven't had a chance to actually get into those. But maybe in the future. Okay, grabbing my little brush here. I'm going to add some detail to the eyes here. So we'll start, let me see here. We're going to use a little bit of a gray color. It's a grayish blue. I mean, it's really close. This color here is almost identical to the color on the top of the head of that bird. Okay, so and that was, whoops, got to clean up my brush a little bit. I'm going to bring a little water over to my plate. I'm going to grab, it's pretty dry, but I think I can still pull some up. All right, little tiny bit, little touch of my blue. But anyway, that membership is down the road. I really enjoy making those. Lots of people like those, but it's a niche, more of a niche thing. Whereas the membership, the art membership that I've got right now is more of a, generalized, universal appeal sort of paintings, like, landscapes and beaches and animals and things like that. Okay. All right. So right now I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit with the colors that I'm using. Okay, trying to find the right color, which is really close to what we've already got on the bird. Like I've said many times in the past, my style of painting is I kind of go with the flow. I don't have to plan everything out, every single step of it out before I start. But because of my experience, I can kind of make my decisions as I go, gauge as I go, and make adjustments as I go. And you'll get there too. It's just a matter of going for it. But the biggest thing, and I know you probably heard me mention this, is you experiment. Just experiment. Start experimenting. People are afraid to make mistakes. People are afraid if they mix this color with that color, what am I going to get? Just mix them. Just do it. Doesn't mean you have to put it on your painting, but you will learn from that. Experiment. All right, let's see what this looks like. I'm feeling it's a little too dark, but we'll find out right now. Oh, it's not bad. So just adding this color in here in the eye of the bird. I'll add a little bit up here too. Their eyes are closed, right? They're little, looks like they're sleeping. They're just cuddling next to each other. Maybe they're meditating. But all right. Now they have a little tiny line that goes down the middle, right here at the top where the eyelids meet. Okay, close to the top. On this one, it's really near the top. And that's going to be a little bit of a struggle with this brush that I'm using to create, but we'll see. We'll tackle it. I'll take a little bit of black. Now, what I'm doing with this black is there's a little bit of water on my brush already. I'm going to take this and put it right in here so it mixes a little bit with the background color that I've already created. Now I'm going to spin my brush as I pick up the paint when I'm ready to apply this to the painting. I spin the brush, and it makes that point really skinny. Now my angle's a little bit off, so let me see if I can manage it. But all this is dry. I can put my hand right up on the canvas. I need to go across like this. Now I'm holding the brush really close to the tip. It gives me a lot more control. And what I want to do is in one stroke, okay? You see how that one little change makes a big difference, and all of a sudden, now we have an eye that's closed, and we got some eyelids in there. I mean, you can see where the eyelids connect. Now on my other bird, let me see if I can do this holding my canvas in the air like this. The little line is up at the top, so I gotta go across like this. Okay. I'm not sure if you guys can see that in the video, but got two little lines across each eye. Now, the other thing is around, especially around this eye here, you got a little bit of a white at the top and over the top edge of that eye. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that now. Now these little details I normally wouldn't add till the very end, but for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna do it today, right now. Doesn't hurt anything. Doesn't mean I'm gonna have to go back and do it later. Once it's done in this case. So I'm grabbing some white, adding a little bit of water to it. There's a little bit of gray that's mixed in there, but that's okay. It's bright enough where it should show up nicely against the background around the bird. Now I'm going to do this right in here. Now again, my knuckle goes right up against the canvas. Reload my brush here. I'm going to come underneath and do the same thing. A little bit of a highlight underneath. Let's see right over here. Little details here and there that start to make a big impact. Right over here too. Now we're going to be but involving ourselves with different styles in our membership. So, not everything is going to be this detailed or complex. There's going to be lots of them that are really simple. This is just one thing. But look at this eye right here. Let's see if we can pick it up now. Sounds good, Tina. Awesome. Fantastic. Love to hear that. We're going to have some fun in there. Okay. But all these little things. Now watch. Our nose there has a highlight in it. Okay. Now this isn't the end result or the end color that I'm going to be using for the nose, but just to give you an idea as to how a little pop of color makes a big difference. Going over to my number 3 brush. I'm going to grab some white. And although this there isn't stark white, it's more of a cream color. So you can grab a little bit of paint with this brush and watch what this little pop of color does to the beak here. Might be a little too strong, but you'll get the idea. Okay, a little pop of color gives our bird a little bit of dimension now on that beak. Okay, look at that. Look at that. Okay, same thing over here. If I do the same thing right in here, look at this. Subtle, but powerful. And that it changes things up quite a bit. Okay. Again, folks, do not be intimidated. If you don't feel like you're ready for these stages, you just go for it anyway. Mimic me as much as you can. Eventually, by mimicking, you start to develop your own style. But if you try to, mimic the way I'm holding the brush, mimic the direction that I paint in. Obviously, you may not necessarily have the same type of brushes that I'm using, and the right brushes are going to make a big difference. But work with what you've got. Do your best to imitate. When you don't have the experience, imitation is the way to go. You watch what somebody else is doing, somebody who seems to know what they're doing, and then you try to mimic them. you will go a long ways. Okay? So, but don't be intimidated to the point where you don't try it because you're afraid you're not at that level yet. Who cares? Just go. All right, let's work on the beaks there. So I got a little bit of yellow. I'm going to grab some of this. I'm going to bring it over to my mix plate. Let's see, different mix plate. We'll use this one from yesterday. I like to reuse my plates. Okay. Going to grab some white. Bring that over also. Now, you can, when you transition your colors over to wherever you're doing your mixing, you can mix them right from the get-go. Or you can put them next to each other, like I'm doing here. And I'll use either or, it just depends. Okay, and then I'm also going to take a little touch of my brown. Where is my brown? Where is my mix plate? Give me one. Oh, there it is. My other palette. So yellow, brown, and white right next to each other. Okay. I want to mix a color. I want to mix a color for the beak. So it's primarily yellow and white. Now I know there's different colors of yellow, right? Different shades of yellow, different shades of brown, and it kind of depends on what you're working with. But play with your mixtures a little bit, and you'll eventually get to, as long as you've got a variety of colors to work with, even if they're not necessarily exactly the same brown that I'm using, you'll get something close enough that will work. Okay, there we go. Probably need it a little bit darker. All right, let's try that, see what that looks like. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to add it right in here. Still working with my number 3 brush. I'm just being careful. I'm using the corners of the brush or just the skinny flat side of the brush. Now I'm going to try to cover up my pencil lines that I've got up here. Okay, right in here. I covered up my highlight a little bit, but that's okay. Remember, that's not, I don't want to use straight white for that. So I'll come back and add it a little bit later, but right now I can just dab over the top of it and blend that in a bit. Okay, I'm going to come over to my other bird and do the same thing. And sometimes, if we're using too big a brush, as soon as it feels like you're uncomfortable, you'll feel it. If it's too big of a brush, you're going to really quickly start having problems trying to get the brush to fit in the area that you're trying to paint. Switch to a smaller one. If you're feeling that discomfort, switch to a different brush, a smaller one, if you have one. Otherwise, work with what you got and make the best of it. Again, folks, I just want to emphasize this level of difficulty will only be happening from time to time within the membership. Okay? Most of the stuff will be easier than this, but again, these tough ones are where you almost force yourself to grow. Okay? But all right. And a lot of it is in how you look at it. It's tough in that it requires some patience and building up of layers and things like that. Okay? But all right, let's take a look at our little bird here. We could add more detail to the beaks. Yeah, we'll do that now. I'm going to switch over to my little 0, my little round number 0. I'm going to take just a touch of black. Okay, I'm going to grab a little tiny bit of this black here. I'm going to bring it over to the mix plate that I was using. I'm going to need a little bit more of my brown and my yellow, so let me scoop some of that up. Okay, burn right there. A little more yellow. Okay, we're gonna mix all that together. I'd have to add a little bit of white in here. This is too dark, but it's okay. We'll use brown and yellow to lighten things up for now. Okay. Now we'll add a little bit of white. What do we got? Okay. Now I'm going to take this and add some of those dark areas around the beak. Like right in here. When you apply the paint to the canvas is when you'll get the better idea as to whether you need to darken it or lighten it. In this case, there's an area in here. I'm painting right down in there. I need to darken some of that up. Now, I'm not trying to color match exactly like what's on the original. As long as it makes sense on my painting, that's what I'm looking for. Okay, maybe up here a little bit. Along that top edge. Up here also. I'm painting over the top of my pencil lines. Okay, now this edge right there, that dark edge right in there, we're going to add that right now. Look how that beak is going to all of a sudden begin to pop. For that, I'm going to take a little bit of this dark burgundy color that we created for the background. There's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of this color. Okay, so I'm just going to use that. So I'm going to bring this over to my plate here. I'm going to add a little bit of water to thin it out. Lots of little subtle tricks, little things that you'll learn as you go. Now, right in here. And then down in here. Bring this over to this edge. Okay. You see how that begins to change things up? Right now we're getting more depth around that beak. I'm going to take this color since we got a little bit of that around some other parts like in here, right over the top of this one where the little shadow area where the two birds' bodies meet. We're both defining the edge of the bird and then adding the shadows. The little shadow where the two bodies meet. There's a definition of that edge of the beak happening, and then we're defining the shadow between their bodies. Okay. So if we look, something that I haven't touched on with this painting is that if you look at where the direction of the light is coming from on the birds, it looks like the light is coming from this direction, from the front. Okay, it's not coming from the top. Although there might be a little bit of a light source on top, most of the light is coming from the front. There's a shadow side over here. You can tell because there's a shadow on this side. There's a shadow on this side. Slight shadow over the top. Really, really subtle. It's the majority of the light is happening is right in here. On the beak, the reflection of the light is right here. on this beak. It's right from the front. So those are the little clues as to where the light's coming from. The lightest part of the birds is right in here. So if we look at the little feet down here, the little claw, same thing. The highlight is right up towards the front. So if you're looking for clues as to where the light's coming from, you'll get those from doing a quick analysis. Okay. All right. So where was I? Adding the shadow. Where were you, Jesse? Well, you were talking a lot. Just adding a little bit of blue to my dark burgundy that I brought over because, whoa, we just lost power to part of the building. So if things got dark in here, all of a sudden it's because of that. But we still got internet. Yes, we still have internet, so we're good. My next door neighbor here in the studio where I work, in the building where I have my studio, must have turned on his microwave. Something with the old circuitry within the building sometimes causes the what do you call it, to pop. All right, right in here. Here we go. Circuit breaker. So this little shadow in there is a little more subtle. Not quite as defined. Just going to dab a little bit. I'm going to lighten it up a bit more. It's a little too harsh. You don't want that. And I'm using the light blue. There's a little bit of almost of a light blue hue in that dark area in there, because it is taking up some of the color of the birds. Okay, so even though it's a dark area in there, my eyes are picking up a bit of the bird's color inside of there. So I'm mixing that with my paint, my dark paint, to make sure that there's some of that hue in there. Water to thin it out. I can hear them scrambling outside to get the breaker back on. Luckily, it doesn't really affect my studio too much. I got to get that fixed. As long as my internet's working, we're good. There we go. They got it. Too funny. Oh, they're making me lose my concentration. No, that's not good. I can hear footsteps outside as they're scrambling about. All right. Again, just adding the rest of this shadow in between the birds. A little under the beak, just refining the shadow there. Now I'm removing a lot of the paint from the brush now. So I'm mostly using a little tiny bit that's left. And I'm coming around the edges of my shadow, on the left edge, and blending out some of the paint so it thins it out a bit and the shadow is less harsh. So how are you guys liking this coffee and painting session? Coffee and paint, or whatever you're drinking. Planning on doing some of these within the membership, and just sitting down and painting away while we sip on something. Now bring my shadow here, bring it into my bird. All right, everyone. So for today, I think that's going to end our session. Okay, look where we are with our little birdies here. Okay, tomorrow we'll finish up. Let's plan on starting at let's start at 9 o'clock. We'll start at 9. Tomorrow's what, Thursday? Yeah, 9 o'clock will work. So we'll finish up Got some work on the branch, got some work on the birds here. Still need to define them a little bit more. And it's mostly adding, once we had those shadows in there, more of the darker shadowed areas in here, then everything's really going to start to make more sense. Okay. Just little subtle things that we've got left to do in there to clean things up and finish things off. Okay. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed today's little session. Again, this has been recorded, so if you've missed any part of it, you can come back and watch it. We got part one we did part one yesterday. We drew the birds, we did the first layer of paint, and then tomorrow we'll finish it off. Okay. Even something like this, where there's not a whole lot going on in the picture, right? There's not a whole bunch of different details. Can take a little while to develop. Again, depends on the type of style that you're looking to do this in. I chose a little bit of a realistic look, right? A realistic approach, somewhat, not too heavy, but enough to make it so you have to build on it a bit. There's layers involved, and but yeah. So we'll finish up tomorrow. Okay, we'll finish up tomorrow. So come on back and join me, and then bring your questions if you guys have any questions regarding the process or the membership. Again, you want to go on over to the if you're interested, the link to the details, the Facebook post where I put all the details about the membership are in the description of the video. In this video, if you go to the top, you'll see the link there, and you can go over, take a look, see if you're interested. If you haven't signed up yet, also you can send me questions about it over email. We're going to do stuff like this within the membership. Lots of really fun stuff. Q&A sessions, as I've already mentioned. Workshops where we strictly work on techniques, fundamentals around painting things like color mixing, shadows. Some of what we're doing here. We're gonna be working on things like composition, shading, and then of course we have our drawing tutorials, we have our painting tutorials, we're gonna have special events or special guests from time to time, where people that work in other mediums and around other type of art come on and share with us their craft, maybe show us the process. We have creative entrepreneurs with stores and businesses around their art to teach us a little bit about the selling process. If you're interested in putting up a little Etsy store, or you want to sell online in another way, you have your own website, perhaps. Things like that are all going to be part of the membership. So anyway, go take a look at the details. Again, the link's in the description of the video. If you have any problems getting the details from there, simply go over to my past posts over the past week on Facebook have been about the membership. So, okay. Okay, Tabitha, yeah, send it to me. If you have pictures of your progress so far, you guys want me to take a look at your paintings, what you've got at the moment, send it over. Send them over via Messenger here on Facebook, or on YouTube. You can email those over to me. I'll be happy to assess. Okay. Yep. The darker bird has a little more detail in him, and he stands out a little bit more as he does in the actual painting. The actual picture. This little guy stands out a little bit more because there's a little more detail in him. This bird, because of his coloring, he's a little bit more washed out, so a little less color to work with. Whereas this guy has a lot more happening within his little feathers and stuff. But again, if you notice, it already looks like little feathers in here by brushing the direction of the actual feathers in the picture. Okay. But all right, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I'll see you all tomorrow. Don't forget, this is being recorded in case you can't join me live. I totally get it. We work. We have stuff to do, right? So, but anyway, the session will be recorded. All right, everyone. Hope you have an amazing rest of the day, and I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye. You got it, Penny. Bye-bye.